China is building 34 nuclear reactors. America is currently building how many? Zero. While our power grid struggles to keep up with AI and data centers, the US military is racing to put nuclear reactors on bases, not in 20 years, but by 2028. Today, I'm talking with Dr. Youssef Ballout, a nuclear engineer who's designed reactors for submarines, spacecraft, and now the next generation of power plants. We'll talk about why nuclear energy isn't what you think it is and why America's energy future might depend on getting this right. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Advanced Nuclear, the official podcast of UCAN Power, where leading experts, innovators, and policymakers explore the latest developments shaping the future of nuclear energy.
My guest today is Dr. Youssef Ballout, founder and CEO of Kadmos Energy Services. They're developing small modular light water reactors for utilities, data centers, and industry. Youssef is a longtime nuclear engineer. He worked in the U.S. Naval Reactors Program and led advanced reactor design at INL. Now he's focused on making nuclear plants that are actually deployable using passive safety, natural circulation, and proven components. Youssef, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. All right, so let's just dive in. Question number one. Um, I like to start with the big picture. We keep hearing that America is in an energy crisis, that our power grid can't keep up with demand, especially with AI and data centers exploding. At the same time, we're told nuclear energy is the answer. But here is probably what confuses people. If nuclear is so great, why did we stop building reactors decades ago? What happened?
So that's a great question. The answer to it is really a little bit buried in history. But let's just say, step even further back. America in the 20th century invented nuclear technology for civil application. So a variety of reasons why the standard reactor in the world right now is more than anything else is the pressurized water reactor. It wasn't invented in America. It was actually invented as part of the work that was done within the United States Nuclear Navy. And that set the standard. And then we had a really large number of reactors that were built in the starting from the 60s, 70s, 80s. And then really something happened in this country. That was the 3 Mile Island event in 1979, if I remember correctly. And that led, actually in 1978, and that led to a lot of fear of nuclear and caused a cessation of building nuclear reactors in the country. It didn't happen in one day, but basically what wasn't on the table yet did not proceed. So that is the fear factor that came into nuclear technology. Then, of course, there's something else that happened in 1986 in what used to be the Soviet Union at the time, and then later became part of the Ukraine. That's the Chernobyl reactor. A different event happened there. And so those two events at the time placed a lot of fear in people's hearts, and that caused a stoppage in nuclear reactors buildup and so on. What didn't stop is that other countries continued with the obvious example is really China, even though they're relatively a late comer, they're building a lot of reactors. And it's basically dozens of reactors are built in China as we speak today. The reason for that, first, China is a very, very large country with very large population, and they have a huge consumption of energy, just like the rest of the world today. And so fear was part of it, but that is also something very important that played into cessation of buildup activity in the United States, cost. Nuclear reactors, the way they were managed, they were built, and so on, they cost a lot of money. And that also caused people to take a second look. And then you have the issue of the natural gas that came in. And that also, because it is relatively cheap, there is no way around it, but it's just relatively cheap and caused people to say, okay, wait a minute here. I'm afraid of nuclear reactors. They cost a lot of money. And then there is this other thing that probably costs a lot less, and it does. So I'm going to go with that. So there's a variety of reasons that cause people to step back away from nuclear. But then the other side of this coin is that the environmental issues that came in. And people start talking about, well, how we're going to stop putting carbon into the air and all of these greenhouse issues that we need to worry about for the protection of the environment and our lives in reality. Well, that actually plays into the other side where renewables came in. And instead of nuclear coming in, part of renewables, because actually nuclear technology is the ultimate renewable. But and the cleanest energy there is. We ended up in a place where we have competing technologies with nuclear, the fear factor that came in, and the economic issues that played against nuclear. That actually goes a long way in creating obstacles in front of the comeback of nuclear. But then you have one thing that just started to happen in recent years. First, we know that the renewables like solar and wind, they get interrupted by a variety of factors, not the least of which is the sun doesn't always shine. And then, of course, the wind doesn't always blow. And so, given those two factors, we know that renewables are not enough by themselves because you have to support them with batteries and so on. And in my view, you cannot run a country on with heavy industry like the United States on batteries. You need to have something what we call energy dense that can operate all the time, 24/7, 365 days a year. You cannot cut the electricity from industry, and you cannot cut the electricity from a state of Texas, for example, when in the middle of an ice storm, that caused a lot of people to be damaged and hurt by not having electricity. So many factors cause people to take a second look at nuclear. But today, something else happened. People started talking about AI and data centers, and these are facilities that consume enormous amount of energy, basically electrons. And of course, you can use nuclear reactors or any other source of energy to create heat that can be used also in the cooling of data centers, like refrigeration and so on, and other things. Or you can actually uh, talk outside of data centers, the electrification of society. We all use computers and we all use many different things that require electrons. And the electrons are not born out of thin air. They're born out of some form of heavy industry that causes the creation of these things. So this comeback is caused by demand. And so people are not willing to actually, once you introduce a product or a technology, it's not very easy for people to let it go. And so, yes, nuclear energy had an amazing bad downturn, and now there's great resurgence of the need for it. And therefore, you see a lot of American startups. And across the globe, actually, there are other entities in some of the countries that are actually trying to do the same thing we're doing here. But just like in the 1950s and 60s and beyond, the American nuclear technology is leading the way. We, as a society, we continue to innovate in many aspects of nuclear technology. And so you see a lot of nuclear startups, many different designs, many different ideas, and so on. So,
Oh yeah, that was incredible to hear. I mean, I took some really good notes, and I definitely want to pull the thread on the comeback is caused by demand. So how does that marry against what originally caused, like, the stoppage of nuclear innovation and production across the US, right? You mentioned fear and cost. How does that marry against, demand? So the demand is so powerful, so prolific that, you don't really have to worry about fear and cost. Or is that something that you think we should address holistically?
yeah, I think we should address them in a holistic way. And let me talk about it. The cost is real. The cost is absolutely real. Nuclear reactors were built at the cost of multiple $1 billion a piece. The last two reactors that the country actually finalized in 2022, 2023 at Vogel in Georgia, is the estimate is somewhere between 10 and $14 billion, the cost of
Oh, yeah.
uh, these reactors. So each, very, very expensive. And so that cost is not fiction. It's right there. The other side is the fear factor. That's actually the failure of people like me, engineers, not only nuclear engineers, engineers at large and scientists at large, to really step up and explain this technology to the public, that it's not as fearful as it is. And so let's just take the events of 3 Mile Island in the United States. This is a long time ago, and people just they felt, right or wrong, that this is a very fearful technology. We're going to be very, very scared around it. When in reality, no one was killed. No one. There is not a single fatality that happened because of 3 Mile Island. That actually should be in the back of the people's mind. Meaning what? It means that the reactors, that even when they go bad, they're safe. They're designed to be safe. And the lessons of 3 Mile Island and the other two events, Fukushima and Chernobyl, is to actually design reactors, especially now, the fourth generation of reactors, they're self-sustaining and they're automated in the way of safety. So if something goes wrong, they shut themselves down. So physics provide the safety of these reactors. No engineer has to be involved. It just does it by itself. Of course, that's because of design, not because of natural creation or anything. It's just engineers designed it to be so. So reactors cannot be left to their own devices. They have to be designed right. Engineers do design them right. And one thing also is to address the issue of safety. I look at Fukushima, nearly 19,000 people were killed in the events of Fukushima. But most people, actually, in fact, all people died because of drowning. They drowned. It was not radiation that did anything to people. People drowned. And so when the public hear about so many fatalities in Fukushima, very sad. But it wasn't nuclear. It wasn't nuclear. It was other things. And but again, the fear is went into the heart of the populations across the world and say, "Oh my God, we're not going to touch these things anymore." But again, the fear is not well founded because of people like me, engineers that don't go out and explain what I'm just telling you. That it's just like the reactors are safe. In fact, it wasn't an issue for me to get my wife and two kids right outside a nuclear reactor. Just it's not a very scary thing for me uh, because I know how reactors are designed, are built, they're constructed, the safety elements that go into all aspects of these designs. So yeah, I wasn't worried about having my kids near a nuclear reactor. So here I am.
It's it's funny that you mentioned that because when I was doing research, seeing what you've said recently in prep for this podcast, I read about you allowing your daughter to touch the external components of the
Yeah, they're basically
reactor.
outside, yeah, outside the reactor building,
Yeah,
just touch it and so on. It's not something to be afraid of.
right.
And I'm going to repeat the story. I told my daughter, put your hand on this wall. And so I did touched it like this. I pulled my hand back and so pretending it's hot. And I told my daughter, I said, well, why don't you try the same? She said, Dad, we get it. It's hot. I said, no, 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 you got to try it. She said, Dad, it's hot. I get it. I said, no, no, you got to try it. So she did. And finally she left her hand on it. She said, Dad, you're lying. It's not hot. I said, get used to it. You're going to hear a lot of lies about nuclear. And that was the point. And she's a professor now, and she knows more about the world than I do myself. But at the time, she didn't know this thing. So reactors are safe. They're designed with safety in mind. The nuclear reactor technology is old enough to actually control itself, meaning that we design reactors today to actually go basically quiet if something is out of line. So that's what we do with nuclear reactors today.
I want to talk about the military connection, in that regard. if I'm remembering correctly, there's an EO out kind of requiring the Army to have a reactor up by, I think the number is September 2028. Don't you? I'd love to get your thoughts on that. Would you say that that's aggressive? And if so, I suspect AI and the many data centers that are popping up everywhere could be driving this. But I just want to know, what are your thoughts right now around why do you think the military is now all of a sudden all in on nuclear power?
So the military is like everybody else. They do need energy. They need uh, not neutrons, they need electrons. So they need to make electricity, they need to create heat, and so on. And so, in that sense, they need the stability of energy source that nuclear can provide. If you go with anything like renewables, for example, you don't have that uh, constant presence of energy depending on weather or natural events and so on. And so that's one thing. The other factor to it is that the military may need also to have, if you're actually in a, let's say, let's go back to Iraq or to Afghanistan. American fatalities on the road, on the highways, transporting gasoline and diesel was just most of our fatalities were because of that. American loss of life was mostly transporting energy from point A to point B. And so you do need the presence of an energy source where you're using it. Say you're in Kandahar, Afghanistan. Well, wouldn't it be much better if you have a reactor sitting there and you drop it there, you use it, and then when you're done with it, you fly it back? Those are micro reactors, small reactors. So this is a sense of how the military could be using the reactors. And also, the military is planning on using these things not in harm's way, not in a war sense. It's basically to power their bases or the areas around their bases where military families live and so on. Those are tiny cities, and they can use
Yeah.
electricity because it actually gives these bases independence. And of course, if you are living, if the military base is in Alaska, well, it takes a lot of energy to transport diesel or gasoline or whatever source of energy you might use to those bases. And the towns also in Alaska. So wouldn't it be a lot more efficient to also have these microreactors or SMR, small modular reactors, near where the bases are or included in the bases? And so that is what's behind it. 28 or 30, I'm not going to comment on the date itself because it's just all in the eye of the beholder. Can you deliver it in due time for when the armed forces want those reactors? It is feasible. It's a question of what design you're using, how much funding does the private company is. This is, by the way, all being driven or designed and will be delivered by the private sector. The
Right.
military itself is not, as far as I know, designing these reactors. They're just using the American entrepreneurial system to actually create those reactors for them. And whether it's delivered in 28 or 2030 is really a minor issue. The bigger issue is to create that technology to deploy it. Like when the U.S. Navy created its reactors in the early 50s to deploy them in submarines and later in aircraft carriers, is the same thing. The impact will be universal. Whatever we do with the armed forces, it will really impact everything else because people look at the technology that gets created for the military and then try to use it as a template for what happens next. That happened in the private sector for the big reactors, and my view, it will be happening also again with the SMR or anything else. Now, keep in mind, those reactors are not going to be one type. So people say, well, there's like some, I don't really know the real number, but some 80 startup or 50 startup nuclear reactor companies and so on. Do we need all of them? Well, the answer to that is by some estimates, there are like 84 different car types on the American highways. Do we need them all? Well, of course not. Model T Ford would have been just nice. to take you from point A to point B, but that's not how we human beings operate. We like variety of things, and we end up with variety of things. And I think that's a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing. It's just that the American spirit of innovation, actually, it's not American even, it's just the human spirit of innovation, continues to play a role in everything we do. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right, right. I believe that at the heart, the core of every human being, we are all creators in some aspect, right? And so when you think about the variety of reactor designs, right, like I look at it in a very layman way, it's that's just their creative, they're flowing, right? That's just their creative ability in action. So it's really awesome to see that. Now, as a, I'm going to say relatively new Virginia resident in the country parts of Virginia, I have become very familiar with Home Depot, and trying to build out a garden, and, do some DIY stuff around our home. When I was again reading about Cadmus, I saw that you described your approach as the Home Depot approach. Could you expand on that as it relates to nuclear reactors? I thought that was extremely catchy. So well done on the messaging because it totally caught my attention.
Well, thank you for asking me that question. So, what people are doing right now with the advanced nuclear reactors, there are a lot of innovations. People are coming up with a lot of different designs, and a lot of these designs require some level of R&D, research and development, and a lot of them also they're looking beyond what exists today, like pressurized water reactors. And there is a cost to that. First, you need to do R&D, and you also need to create a new supply chain industry to allow you to build these reactors. And then all of that will cost you in time and in money. So I looked at all of this, and I did work after I left the nuclear navy in 2016. I was a president of a company called Elysium Industries, and it worked on molten salt reactors. As this is actually, by the way, my favorite reactor is a molten salt reactor, a fast spectrum molten salt reactor, and that's a different story to go into that. But that's my preferred reactor. But why am I not working on that? Because it will take more R&D, more time, and it's just expensive. But if I just turn my head around a little bit, what is it that the country is asking us today? Are they asking us for neutrons, or are they asking us for heat and electrons, and especially electrons? No, they're asking for electrons. If that is the question, so then we need to go and figure out, do we have an industry today and a supply chain system and fuel that can fuel and allow these reactors that we're designing to exist faster and less expensive? And in fact, with some modification, make them also cost less in land impact. And the answer to that is the Home Depot approach, which means what? Home Depot approach, what's meant by it is that you design your reactor to use what's on the shelf or what exists today. That's the Home Depot approach. You go to Home Depot approach and you need to buy a sump pump to put in the basement of your house. You don't go in there and you say, here's a sketch and I want you to give me one of those. And then the guy will tell you, we don't have those. So you say, make it. And then she'll yell at you, make it. It's going to take me 2 years to make it for you. You say, yeah, still make it. So, or you really use Home Depot for what it is. You buy what's on the shelf. You modify the design of the basement to meet that kind of pump. And that's what we do. When a nuclear engineer working at Kadmos says, hey, Youssef, we're going to use this type of pump with so much power in the reactor to move so many gallons of fluid in so many minutes. So I look at it, so that's great. Who makes it? Well, no one. We have to actually talk to someone to make it for us, say Curtis Wright or something. I said, no, 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 no. Go back, design it for something that exists. And that's the Home Depot approach. Now, I believe we're going to be able to do it across the board, do it this way. And then the Home Depot approach also uses the databases that we know exist for pressurized water reactors today, because that's what the reactor I'm going after is a pressurized water reactor. It is the bread and butter of most of the American reactors today. For example, we in the U.S. today we have 93 working reactors in the civil sector. 61 of these reactors are actually PWRs, pressurized water reactors, also called light water reactors. So uh, going with something different is not wrong, but it's not most economical, it's not most efficient, and it's not going to answer the need of today. So that's what I'm going after. I'm not, so I don't need to reinvent the wheel if the wheel is already there.
Listen, I'm in complete agreement there. So I want to back up and talk about China, right? I think that's going to be an interesting topic, across, the entire industrial base for quite some time. And I think it was a YouTube video that I was watching, and you were talking about, and I kind of mentioned it earlier in the episode, that China has 34 reactors under construction, probably more to date, and we may have one. I was not able to find anything that spoke to one. I mean, according to I think the World Nuclear Association, there are zero in construction for us here in the U.S.
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, I'm interested in seeing, just based on your experience and also what you're seeing from your lens, do we have a problem here? Is there a bigger story as it relates to potentially America losing its nuclear dominance? And if that is indeed the case, what could that mean for national security if China becomes the world's leader in nuclear energy?
So America's leadership in nuclear technology and probably in everything else, but let's just stay with nuclear, is ours to lose. We need to stay in the leadership by doing things, not by uh, just reputation. What you were yesterday or 10 years ago is nice, is not going to be enough to stay as a leader in this technology. China, yes, they're building dozens of reactors and many others, actually. It's not just China. India is building many reactors. Russia has a few. Even Egypt is building a reactor right now. So a lot of countries are in the business of building reactors, and we're not. And the American position has always been that we need to be the dominant leader of all these technologies, and that's a desire that has to be supported by deeds. The deeds are that the U.S. government has to be supporting the nuclear industry, especially the startups, and they're doing a lot of that actually, which is really great. Under the Biden administration, there was a lot of support of nuclear, and now under the Trump administration, it's really the same. As maybe a little bit more right now, but that. Nuclearization of the American economy has been happening for a while, which is a very positive thing. China, you have to remember that we used to think that China duplicates but does not innovate. Not true anymore. Not true anymore. So they used to take something that they saw that came like, I'll just take the example of Huawei. America, Steve Jobs invented the smartphone that we love and so on. And then other countries came in and they looked at it. Well, they duplicated. Well, I'm not sure they're duplicating anymore. I think now they're innovating. They're doing things that I'll give you the example of the laptop that Huawei just made up. You look at the standard laptop that you and I might use, but then you see that the entire thing is a screen. Where the keyboard is actually a screen. They fold it, and then you can put your full hands on your full hand on that screen. The lower part of the screen becomes a keyboard. It's a digital keyboard, not a physical keyboard, but doesn't matter. We haven't done that. So to me, that's innovation. So are we smarter than the Chinese? Of course we're not. We're not. It is what we are doing with our intelligence that allows us to be dominant or not. China is advancing very fast, and they're really pretty much behind us, and they can dominate more than we can. And I'm going to tell you when they can actually eat our lunch on the international scene. You take a lot of countries in Africa and the Middle East, but especially let's take Africa. They like Ghana, Kenya, and others. They are very, very interested in having small modular reactors. So we'll call those reactors. The Chinese are actually working very hard to get into these markets and get ahead of us. What if they do? That's very bad news for us. And here's why. Once you adopt the technology of one country, in this case US or China, you're locked in for nearly 1 century with that technology because they're going to bring you everything you need to run those reactors. It's not going to be one, it's going to be more than one. But even if it is one, you're locked in because they're going to get you the fuel that you need, the technicians that you need, the materials that you need. You're locked into that technology. So not only it lost your commercial possibility within that country of nuclear technology, it's a lot more than that. It's a lot more than that. And then also there's the geopolitical impact of having a relationship so strong between China and that particular country. So if America wants to stay, and we do, at the dominant phase of that technology, at the top level of it, we need to be looking at the international scene very carefully and making it possible for us to go in and work with these countries and help them develop their nuclear technology. We know how to do it, but we also need the government to be heavily involved in that technology. Otherwise, we're going to be left behind. We totally are going to be left behind. And the Chinese, they offer incentives, especially cost, for example, and turnkey reactors. So they say, don't do anything. I'll just get to the reactor and you just get electrons out of it. Very compelling stories. But of course, once they get in, the Chinese are going to dominate those markets in many other things beyond nuclear. And that's very important. So it's not just about nuclear, it's about a relationship between two nations that we do not want to lose.
Oh, I love that. It's not just about nuclear, it's about the relationship between two nations that we do not want to lose. Wow. Um, I want to ask a question about supply chain, but I also have like two other questions that I want to ask. So I'm like juggling. So I'll tell you what, briefly, from a supply chain perspective, when you talk about what's happening on the international side, the international scene, how does that impact what we are wanting to do here in the US? Like, how does that impact our supply chain? I mean, those international relationships are going to be important because some of the components that we need, we're going to have those international relationships to get those components. So could you expound a bit more on the supply chain aspect of this?
Well, one of the people think about the fuel, the nuclear fuel, UO2, in a standard reactor, as the most important piece in the reactor. It's not. It's one of the most important pieces. The reactor vessel, that's basically that big can that everything goes inside it.
Mhm.
We don't make them anymore. We invented how to make them. And Pittsburgh was the lead in the country, in the world, actually, in producing steel and so on to make these big vessels. We don't. We buy them from, even today, we buy them from Doosan, South Korea.
Right.
Why is that? Because we let that technology atrophy in the United States. So we need to bring back that technology into the US. We don't intend to make it shut down anywhere else. We need to work on reviving it here for us in our country. We can do this. The government has to be involved in this because those industries are very, very expensive, and they're going to require the Department of Energy or the government in general to be involved in bringing back these technology. Other things, there are a lot of different things that go into the making of a nuclear reactor, whether it's pump, valves, and then other things that you don't think too much of them, but even computers and even nuclear computer technology. So today, America actually invented the concept, as far as I know, of digital twins. So what a digital twin is, you look at a nuclear reactor, you create a simulated reactor, just like the one that operates in on the ground, and then you make sure that everything that happens in the real reactor is going on also in the virtual reactor, the digital twin. And you would expect that if something is going to happen wrong in the reactor after 3-4 days from today, the reactor will predict it today. The digital reactor or the virtual reactor will predict it today. We're leaders in that technology, in the digital twins, and many other things. And so we need to be able to continue to lead. And the only way you're going to be able to continue to lead is not talking about it. You have to do it. You have to do it. You don't make engineers by just making them read in a book. That's not how engineering works. You got to stand in the lab, build things, break things, make it go wrong, then make it go right. And we need to be doing this for real. We have been working. The country have been working on this, but my fear is that China may be working even faster than us on. You got to remember when AI like ChatGPT came down the pike about like almost 3 years ago. We were all so happy that we have this and we have that, and then not paying attention, the Chinese came up with DeepSeek, and that it turns out they've been working on it. And they claim, I don't know if it's true or not, that it cost them $5 million to develop it. Now, believe it or not, who knows? But that was the claim. And NVIDIA, that actually has chips that can produce amazing capabilities, would cost billions of dollars to make that same technology. So China is doing it much cheaper. True or not is really not relevant. What's more important, on the international scene, the customers will look and say, oh, well, the American thing cost me $1 billion and the Chinese thing will cost me $5 million. It's an easy choice. It's an easy
Right.
choice. Yeah.
Right.
So we need to be thinking on the international level, whether it's supply chain or anything else. It's a competition. Hopefully it will stay friendly competition, but it's really not friendly.
I absolutely love the realism here. I am learning a lot from you, especially as someone who studied nuclear engineering, and there's nothing like having an opportunity to apply, like hands-on application of what you're learning, throughout your collegiate studies. So I am a huge advocate for, if the school's partnered with a local utility that has a reactor, that they can kind of get that experience before they jump out into the real world to work as an engineer in the nuclear industry. It has been fantastic talking with you, and I would like to unfortunately close our conversation. We have to do a part two. By the way, I'm already going to put that out there.
Absolutely.
I'd love to do a part two with you. I would like to know your why. It sounds like you've spent your entire career in nuclear energy, subs, spacecraft, national labs, and now, you've started your own company. It sounds like you've dedicated a lot of years of your life to this technology. What really keeps you going? Like, what is your why?
Curiosity.
I love that.
Curiosity. So I'm going to tell you something about my grandmother on my mother's side. This is a woman who never went to school. Short, Lebanese woman from South Lebanon. She would look you in the eye and she would say, you're going to be an engineer, or you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be an officer in the army. I mean, that's the things she would like. And I don't know what she told me to be or not be, but I think one thing I knew about myself is just like my grandmother, curiosity. The one thing I'm going to tell you about that woman, she didn't like. She didn't like us to be lawyers or journalists.
I think I can understand why, actually.
Yeah, it's just like, and my father was like that. But I'm picking on my grandmother's memory. It's uh, it's very important to know where you come from to know where you're going. So I've always been curious. My very first invention. I was a little boy. I was 15 during the Civil War of Lebanon, and I couldn't go out study at night with my brother and a girl cousin of mine. So I figured out that the building next to us had a phone in it that works. So, and the phone rang, and we didn't have any power, electricity, but the phone rang. And I realized right away why, because phone lines in Lebanon at the time were underground. So all the bullets are not reaching them. And so I went back to the house, stole my father's flashlight, pulled the light bulb with the wires on it, opened the speaker side of the phone, the old dial phone, and then I connected it. Oops, I have light. And that was my
I love
first
it.
invention. That was my first. So I've always been curious. It's curiosity. Nuclear. I was converted to nuclear early on, 1978. I was walking back home during the war, and I saw, I think it was Times or Newsweek magazine, I don't remember, and it basically said 3 Mile Island nuclear nightmare. I didn't know at the time what the word nightmare meant, and I had a habit of always trying to learn one English word every day. So I ran back home. I opened the dictionary and I figured out what it meant. I went back and I bought it, and I didn't. It was 1 lira, basically like $1, and my mother was the minister of economics in our house. So my mother had the habit: if you're going to ask her for anything, you have to explain yourself. What do you need the money for? But if you said a book, she didn't ask. She gave you the money. She just gave you the money. And that was my very first point of conversion to nuclear, is reading that magazine. And about during COVID, my daughters actually went on eBay. They found that magazine and they bought it for me. So I have it because they
What
know
a
the
thoughtful
story.
gift. That is amazing.
They
That
know
is
the
absolutely
stories,
amazing.
so I have it. With that, so that my very first interest in nuclear was on a bad event, 3 Mile Island. Yeah,
Wow.
because
Wow.
I've always had the habit, if there's something that I don't know and I like, I'm gonna go learn it. So that's what I do.
We definitely share that. I say if I don't know how to do something, I'm going to devote the time to learn how to do it. And some people could see this as a pro or con. Like once I get it, once I understand it, once I master it, it's like, okay, so what am I going to do next? It's just the spirit of learning. It's what I love to
Yeah.
do. Um, Thank you so much. Again, this was incredible. I enjoyed speaking with you and definitely learned a lot. We talked about, from the very beginning, right? Fear was in the hearts of people, and that was, I'd say a bit of the impetus, along with cost, behind why, the nuclear industry kind of halted. But it's exciting to know that, now we are back on and ready. There's a lot of innovation happening in the nuclear space. And I love what you said. You said nuclear tech is the ultimate renewal. And I'd love to talk with you about that in a second episode, because it just sounds like, again, a piece of thread that we definitely need to pull just to educate, and also see, what's actually there. I also love that you said the nuclear comeback is caused by demand. And I think obviously we're all seeing that with AI and, the various data centers that are popping up. And I'd say the last thing that I want to close with is the fact that the reactors are designed to be safe. And I believe engineers know that. I believe people who work in, the nuclear industry, especially operators and those who support operators, know that. But does the public genuinely know that? Has the public internalized that? And if they have not, then we have a lot of work ahead from a messaging and educational standpoint. And you have been impactful in that way. So thank you again. That was Dr. Youssef Ballout, founder and CEO of Kadmos Energy Services. You can learn more about Kadmos at their website, and then also about UCAN at our website. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who cares about energy or national security. We are on YouTube now, so a like, comment, or a button to subscribe would be helpful. Thank you again for joining in. I'm Dominique Cooper. This is Advanced Nuclear. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for joining us on Advanced Nuclear, powered by UCAN Power. If this episode brought clarity to the future of American energy, share it with someone shaping policy or industry. I'm Dominique Cooper. This is the moment. This is the movement. See you on the next episode.